She walked on across the powdery dirt floor, out of the back of the barn. This was what she was afraid of. The yawning space, the black distance, it stopped her. It upset Nathan to see her panic. She had to control it. His face tense 14 weeks into the first pregnancy. To see her eyes wide outside the room where they'd scan her, to see her arms stiff by her sides on the high hospital bed, and after Emmy was born, when she ran breathless to her cot, in the middle of the night to make sure she was alive, she'd heard Nathan make a sound under his breath. And now they were both on their own in the house behind her, a 4-year-old and a 3-month-old. In that house that should feel like home but still made her heart clench in her chest as the light faded around it every night. She'd left the door unlocked. Anything could happen, anything. She turned round, but the barn obscured her view of the house, and quickly she turned back to the horizon. There was something there. Something like a snake, something darker than the dark. It was just in front of her. She couldn't see it. She couldn't hear it. Didn't know if it was under her feet or it was about to flap in her face, but something was there. She couldn't move. Far off, a car's headlights swept the plain. A lone bush was illuminated. The black furrows of a ploughed field fanned out, grasses on the edge of a drainage ditch. As something else. She saw herself, or a mirror image of herself, across the fields, a figure silhouetted like a scarecrow in an old coat on their edge. Then the car's lights moved on, casting long, low shadows away to the horizon and gone, only not before she'd seen what was at her feet. There was something in the ditch. In one sweep of the light, she took in a shoe, then the length of him, head down, and she dropped to her knees. He was in the ditch. The point about the loving husband really is that you don't know what's going to come next. It's not a novel, and I don't think any suspense novel really should only ever give you a hint of what to expect. But it's clear from the opening that something terrible has happened in a lonely place where a woman is on her own with her 2 children. She didn't really ever want to be in that place. She's a long way from everyone she knows and all her support mechanisms. And she's probably at the most vulnerable point in her life, and then something worse happens. And it's what we deal with in the novel is how she manages that situation, and whether we know everything about her, whether in some way she has been the agent of her own catastrophe, and how she's going to handle it. The inspiration for this novel, as in almost all the novels I've written, comes from something quite small, incidental, and it's to do with a place. When I was in a similar situation to the heroine Fran Hall, of the heroine of Loving Husband, or protagonist, you can say, of The Loving Husband. I had a small daughter and a small son, and we were leaving London, and we were looking for houses out towards the east, somewhere around Cambridge, but Cambridge is expensive, so we were going off into the badlands of the Fens, and we found the most sort of architectural jewels seemed to cost almost nothing, and we couldn't quite work out why that was. We went to see one of these architectural jewels, which was a rather beautiful Queen Anne house on the edge of the Fens, a very flat landscape that had been used as a working farm until quite recently. And there was something about this place. We went in and we couldn't see why we wouldn't want it. It was so beautiful. It had panelling and high ceilings. And there was one room in the house, though, that just gave me the creeps, and that was the kitchen. And a lot of the action takes place in this novel in the kitchen. And out of that back door that we've just, that Fran walks out of at the beginning of the novel, and we made an offer on that house, but all the way back home to London, we just kept wondering what it was about the place that was wrong. There was something wrong, and then our offer was turned down, and we were always grateful that we never went to live in that house. It was the remoteness, it was the bleakness, and it was the knowledge that I would be putting myself into that situation. I would be probably stopping work, or certainly stopping going into an office. I wouldn't have any friends. I wouldn't have any people. And the last thing I needed was to be in a slightly creepy place, a long way from anywhere. Getting into Fran's mindset was uncomfortable. Yes, it's always challenging to stop a character being too much like yourself, but the truth is, a lot of her came from my situation. And so it was not easy exactly, but it was very straightforward because a lot of everything was in place in that character already. The physical factors of her actual circumstances were already there. And I had imagined, I only had to project myself into that situation. She's actually nothing like me in a lot of ways, but the key to her character felt to me the vulnerability of a young mother, professionally and personally, and that I know already. But it's always challenging to investigate your own character. That it's the last thing a novelist really wants to have in the book is themselves. I think it's actually, the use of houses, physical structures, and architecture, but houses, specifically homes, in fiction is a kind of Freudian thing. It certainly functions in a sort of semi-Freudian way in a lot of novels, as Stephen King has written novels about, many crime novels use a spooky house, and partly that's because it's deeply atmospheric, but partly also it kind of replicates the human mind. You're wandering around, you're walking, there's a dark place you don't want to go to, there are twisty corridors, there are doors you don't want to open. It's an image that's been used in all kinds of fiction forever. It comes very, very naturally to me, and I think actually that's not that uncommon. It also allows you to develop a very tense scene, a fight or a chase in a claustrophobic setting. You're running from room to room. You're trying to get out. You're trying to escape. And in that way, again, it's like the human brain. It feels like a human brain to me. That the attic and the cellar, and what's in the cellar that you don't want to know about. The Fens is a very odd, bleak place, and I know it fairly well. Those are the two things that were important to me. It's on the edge of where I live. Cambridge, where I live, is a very civilized, densely populated place. It's probably one of the most civilized places in Europe, but very near, within 5 or 10 miles, there's this relatively uninhabited landscape. It has an odd mix of populations, some migrant working populations, some very, very ancient populations. It has a peculiar geography with a lot of man-made intervention in the landscape. That's drainage canals, there are grain silos, there are wind farms. So it doesn't feel like a natural place, and it feels like a very empty place. And there's something about emptiness that is vivid and eerie to me, because you should be able to see danger coming from a long way away, but it could be hiding. I think that's, you know there's something out there, but you can't see it. You should be able to see it, but you can't see it. And that's the driving engine of the tension to me in my novel, where Fran is at the back door looking for the danger she knows is out there, and she searches the horizon. And the Fenland horizon is very precisely what I had in mind. I don't know whether my knowing the Fens came first, or whether it's a chicken and egg thing, or I chose the Fens because it was like that, but it works very well. And I don't like the Fens. I didn't go into them for a long time, and then I had to go and collect a bicycle that I'd bought on eBay from a certain town I will not name in the Fens, and I drove along a road, a narrow carriageway across this landscape that seemed so flat you could almost see the earth sort of falling away, and the occasional truck would come the other way, and it spooked me. I don't do research, really. I don't know what research could consist in when what you're interested in is experimenting with. Research, as I've already said, it's in a way it's my life. It's the basics of it. It's putting myself into a situation that of extremists, the difficulties of being a parent, a mother, the difficulties of a new relationship under strain, and then you impose on it from outside something horrible, murder. I don't investigate murders. I think most human beings are quite capable of imagining in fairly fine and horrible detail what it would feel like to have a bereavement, a violent crime committed. And I think that, in my case, certainly too much research would detract from that instinctive feeling for how that pans out in someone's life. But I did do a tiny bit of research into family liaison officers, because there's a key character in the book. It's a family liaison officer who comes to talk to Fran after the crime, after the terrible thing she discovers on her doorstep. I don't know really what domestic noir means, because it's such an enormous, in theory, an enormous category. George Eliot could have wrote domestic noir. Charlotte Bronte wrote domestic noir. I'm not comparing them myself to them, but I think writing about what happens inside a house is everyone knows about that. Everyone relates to that. Domestic means what happens in the hearth, in the home, on the hearth, right there, where you are looking after children or doing the cooking. Of course, to me, that is violence and death and destruction come not just to your door, but inside your door. I mean, what could be more frightening than that? I find it horrifying when thousands of people are killed in a war, but it doesn't have that same intensity of deeply personal fear when somebody's coming after you into your home through your front door or your back door, more usually, coming up behind you as you're at the sink. That's where the real violence is in terms of actual crimes committed. Almost all murders are committed by people you know, and inside your own home. I've just completed another standalone psychological thriller set in England. My previous history as a writer was that I wrote a series of detective stories set in Italy, set in Florence. I've also written standalone set in Italy, and this was me coming to England, which for a long time I didn't think I would be able to do, writing about England, because it seemed too close to home and too safe, really. I couldn't dramatise it enough in my own head. But I seem to have found a voice where I can see the darkness. Perhaps it's getting older, perhaps it's the world getting more dangerous, perhaps it's feeling that danger more intensely. But I think I would certainly, I don't want to stop writing them at the moment at all. I also, when one has written a series, there is a certain comfort involved with that. You come back to the same characters and you really love those characters, otherwise you couldn't go on with a series. And there's a certain comfort involved with starting and you sitting down to start a new book, and some of your pieces are already in place. So writing a series gets you very comfy, and it's, as a writer, that's probably not a good idea. So I'm very glad that I propelled myself, and was propelled, to be honest, by various editors to have the courage to try writing about England and writing standalones without going back to the same characters all the time. And I feel like it works at the moment. I feel like it's really, really working. So I would always go on with it. It's a matter of coming up with another idea every time. But I've just finished one, as I say, and now I've got to spend a couple of weeks thinking what to do next, what to write next. But I don't think it'll be a problem. I'm looking forward to it.